Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Roswell, New Mexico. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's pick up with everything in the pocket dimension, where we have Bonnie, Dallas, and Michael looking for Alex, as well as all the fruit, because that's the only way they're going to fuel up the teleporter so they can go home. Question is, which home are they aiming for? Oasis or back to Earth? Well, Dallas and Bonnie end up going off on their own, and it's interesting how Dallas, well, he went to, like, his need to, like, finish his father's mission, because that's why he is here. He ended up kind of falling into a trap, which I love that he's like, yeah, I literally fell into an Acme-style trap, an obvious one at that, just because I'm so focused on my father's mission. He thinks, is it even worth it in the end if at the end it caused so much pain? I mean, this whole place being created in the first place was all a byproduct of Theo, and now it's like, now they have no idea if Alex is okay or not. And for Bonnie, it's about, once again, making things right. Like, yes, she had nothing to do necessarily directly to deal with Alex ending up here, but that for her, it's still the thing of, I was part of the group that made that happen. Because for her, it's like she never felt like she really belonged anywhere, because she's like, her mom abandoned her, and then, like, Ophia, because she never felt like she really belonged. Because, yes, Jones used her as a weapon, but even Jones kept his distance, because she's like, yeah, he was afraid of me, too. Like, all he had done to amass all those powers, the last thing he wanted was her to, like, wipe that out. Because you'd assume, like, if she, even if it was one of the clone bodies, if she got rid of his powers, there'd probably be no, I mean, genetically, like, any previous powers, he'd probably end up losing them in those respective clones. Like, it attaches itself to your DNA, so probably, like, going to any future clones would, like, be stripped of any abilities. It makes you wonder, like, would he have been able to implant new abilities in any clones? Just something to kind of think about. But for her, she never felt like she had a family, which Dallas is like, Pod Squad will, like, obviously welcome you, as the long lost sibling, which obviously he knows, because last season Pod Squad, welcomed him amongst their ranks and everything. So it was interesting, because for Dallas, it's like he's gotten so focused on his dad's work and everything about exploring that side of himself, that he was a preacher. Like, the fact is, he lost a little bit of, he feels like he's kind of strayed from the path. And I love that Bonnie references, like, oh, like, a shepherd will lay down their life for their sheep. And he's like, you're quoting scripture to me? She's like, yeah, we basically took up residency at, like, that little church. So it's like, right. She's like, I read a couple things. So it's like, everything, obviously your dad has done has been in that same vein as well. So kind of making him, I think, believe that in the end, it's going to be okay, that, because, Dallas is feeling like a little lost, because now he's like, is everything I'm doing really worth it in the end? Like, maybe it'll cause more issues than not. But it turns out the person who set this all up is Alex, who looks very Why the Last Man-esque with the setup. And finally him and Alex and Michael are finally reunited, and they get to spend that time together. Because we kind of finally understand, like, what Alex has been up to. He explains that because this place is set in the 40s, which makes sense now in the grand scheme of things. If Theo built it, he built it as a pocket dimension that is stuck in it. It's meant to be stuck in the time he created it. Like, of course, it wouldn't grow with the world. It's a pocket dimension. So it's meant to kind of always stay the same. But the problem is, because of that, Alex couldn't find anywhere to really go. But when he went to their house, it's because of Maria's ability. He was kind of able to kind of reach out, and you can tell, I think, on some level that it still bothers Michael a little bit, that it's just like, it's still that part of him that's like, I was so focused on other things, I didn't even realize you were gone and that you might have been in trouble and you need me. Like, I think it's like, it's just a thing. He needed someone else to be the antenna to that. He needed it to be Maria, which he I think still on some level that kind of, like, bothers him, but at the same time, it's just like, you know what? I'm gonna put all that aside. I've dealt with it before, and I'm gonna focus on Alex being back, and you're just gonna be in each other's arms, and that's really sweet. And Michael talks about, because Alex is like, right, he played like, it's like, right, their drive-in date and everything. He's like, I just play over and over again like the movie that would be like our lives. And Michael feels bad because it's like, right, I was so focused on my other home of, in the stars rather than being the home here I built with you. Like, I was tempted by, Oasis, but for Alex is completely understanding. It's like, yeah, this is something you've aimed for your entire life. It's something you've longed for as long as I've known you. So I'm not going to fault you for that, no matter where we are. Like, this whole star-crossed lovers thing, it's like, as long as we never lose touch with each other, whether it's this planet or whether it's you on another, like, we will make this work. Because as long as we continue to stare at the same stars, that's all that's mattering. And you're like, that's a smooth line, and that's a beautiful, both in the, obviously it fits the narrative of, like, star-crossed lovers type of situation, but I just thought that was beautiful. And then even Alex, doesn't want to be separated from Michael anymore. And it's like, oh, so how does this sci-fi movie end? It's like, well, pick your favorite sci-fi tropes that we have to go and destroy the comet that's on its way here or whatever. Or, a sci-fi twist. And he proposes to Michael, which I'm like, yo! Which I think was kind of interesting, because immediately you're like, it wouldn't rub salt in the wound, but I was about to say, it's like, you getting proposed to, and Michael's going to say yes, which is going to be interesting considering, like, Liz kind of said, let's put on pause on that, so, but I think at the end, I think Isabel and Max would just be happy for him in the end. But it turns out this decision was also pushed forward because Alex is sick. Basically, this place is radiated. And I figured this. I had a feeling like this place was going to have some kind of effect on Alex. I figured as much. Didn't really think radiation, but it's like, right, Theo built a place without realizing it have an effect on humans, because probably never expecting any humans to come here. And even then, it's like, right, it didn't affect them, so he probably didn't realize like what kind of effect it would have had on humans. Because he probably wasn't well versed in like what kind of like the differences between humans and Oasians, like physiology and stuff like that. So that's why like Michael, Dallas, and Bonnie are okay. Which, like I said, I figured like I was wondering because that whole thing. I was like, oh, he is the one human in this equation. So would there be an effect? And it's like, yeah. Even to the point, like, you look at his, like, he shows his chest. I was like, because the moment, like, him and Michael about to do the thing, and he kind of touches his chest, and it kind of hurts, I was like, oh, boy. So now for Alex, it's got even less time. But for Michael, it's like, right, I was just happy planning out the rest of our lives, and now you want me to plan out, like, a eulogy or something. But for Alex, it's like, I don't want to waste any more time that we don't have to. Like, I'd rather spend that time, like, in love, enjoying what time we have left, rather than kind of, like, sitting and lamenting about it. So, but I don't think Michael's going to stop there. It's like, right, we have aliens, and that's also the thing, like, well, if Max gets his powers back, who knows, like, maybe that's also something Michael's thinking about. It's like, well, Max with his powers, like, who knows what he could fully do, and, obviously, there's a whole side of things, with Shivani and stuff, trying to cheat death, and save her daughter, so maybe there's something in that can help Alex, and I'd assume Max would be the go-to there, but who knows what kind of effect that would have on him, and cheating death like that over and over again, it's like, just not the natural order to things, so like, I'm curious to see how that would happen, because, Max would want to do anything for Michael, and if it's, because Alex is part of their family, and it's like, right, I will... we'll see if that's something. It won't matter if they're not able to get out of here, because it turns out all the trees have been burnt down. So I guess Theo, potentially to make sure that none of Jones or any of his people could get anything, they did that, or maybe without realizing how special they were, or maybe knowing that they were alien, maybe back in the 40s and stuff, the army and stuff burned down all those trees, so it could be either or. Either Theo did as a precaution, hiding the only tree, which now that's gone, well, you'd assume, because that tree it might not be sprouted yet. It's kind of the whole point, because at this point in time, it might just be a seedling that particular tree, the one that because it would still have to potentially be here in this particular time in the pocket dimension. So, but the other ones have been burnt down. So maybe that one still hasn't planted yet. So if it's a pocket dimension, it makes you wonder, like, can it even grow? We'll have to wait and see on that front. But yeah, time sadly is running out on that front. The other side of things, basically, there was an intervention for Liz, and I was so surprised to see Vanessa. I was like, oh, I thought Clyde would have kidnapped you, but nevertheless, we find out later on, it's like, oh, he mind controlled you, so he has stuff like set in motion. It's just like how very Noah of him to like do that. But I was like, okay, because I was confused. I was like, how would he ran into you? And I thought that was going to be part of his plan, but he just kind of let you go. I was like, that's weird. I was like, oh, is she just out and about? I was like, I thought you would have been kidnapped, but I guess not. It's like the guillotine was above her head the entire time. She just wasn't aware of it. But Rosa tries to get Liz to kind of stop, because all she is doing is focusing on the math, on the science. But for her, it's like, I'm trying to protect all of you guys. Don't you realize that? I need it. Like, you guys are trying to, like, talk me off this ledge. But it's like, oh, Maria, it's like, well, Maria would want to be here too, because you're trying to say, like, oh, if it was really that important, Maria would definitely be here. But it's like, she's keeping an eye on things, and she's like, yeah, I know, like, the whole portal situation, trying to get her friends back, that's what I'm trying to do as well. And Max is saying, like, right, you're trying, because she said that she was trying to replicate Max's abilities in the lab. If he won't have them, then she will. But Max didn't realize losing his power. He thought, yes, it was out of fear that he made that decision, just like Liz did. And he was hoping that by making this decision, he would make her safer, but he didn't realize that you never know, like, how everything will ripple out. He had no idea the fallout would be this circumstance of Liz taking this all upon herself to try and mediate that whole situation. So Max is going to face his fear and get his powers back if it means protecting Liz from herself. But before they can even do that, which Liz already had her stash, but Rosa ended up finding it. And because she knew better than anything. And the moment Liz was like, oh, can I get a minute myself? I'm like, what the hell are you about to do? And Rosa immediately saw through, like, what was that? What's in the closet, Liz? She's like, nothing. And it's like, right, that's literally her old stash spot. And like, that's why I'm almost like, that's the sad thing that Liz can't even recognize, like, right, what you just did. It's like, you're hiding your stash in the same place that Rosa hid her stash. But sadly, Clive ended up getting her beforehand, because they thought at first, like, oh, Liz must have knocked her out. It's like, I was like, I wouldn't have thought so, but I guess, like, Rosa could have, like, let her guard down or something. But I'm like, Liz, could have, like, been like, okay, you're right. And the moment her back was turned, knocked her out. But it's like, no, Clive took part in that. He ends up taking Liz, and because we also learned about Clive's past, him being branded by Jones, which is interesting that he didn't immediately recognize the that. I mean, to be fair, you're like, when you're that deep into a cult, that's all you can see, especially because he's like, oh, this will connect. At first I was like, okay, I mean, I was like, he seemed powerful enough, but I guess without Jones actually around. I mean, yes, there's a flower from Jones's body, but I'm like, other than that, like, does he still draw upon power? Because the whole point is like, right, this brand, I use science, and it will connect us so that you're part of my inner circle, and that you can draw upon my power. It's kind of like his whole point, because it's like, oh, I'm gonna bring you into my inner circle, and we see that, that indoctrination to the inner circle being like, right, when you have nothing else and this person kind of becomes your light in the darkness. That's what Jones was for Clyde. And I love the whole Liz thing, but I thought it was interesting, like, a lot of the stuff Liz is saying to him. I'm like, do you not recognize the hypocrisy? It seems like, it's almost a little bit of like you projecting a lot of your stuff onto him as well. I mean, what you're saying is true, that she's like, you don't even realize, like, the fact is, because she's talking about his vice being his obsession with Ophiuchus. It's like, right, you turn on a one person that liked you, who actually cared about you more than anything, and it's like, right, when you do go back to Oasis, you're going to be alone. He's like, yeah, but I'm part of this inner circle. It's like, yeah, but no, that's like, you literally let him brand you. The fact is that it's like, even in death, he has such control over you. It's like, you were never siphoning off of him. He was leeching off of you. And I don't know if she means that both in like a metaphorical or physical way. Like, oh, like the brand didn't work the way you thought it was. Like, oh, this represents like, oh, me drawing upon your power. It's like, no, he was drawing upon yours. Or is it just like, no, it's just metaphorical in the sense of he got your devotion, that's how he was leeching off of you, that your life was his, without you even realizing. It's like, right, he took, he came up with Ophiuchus and he used it and warped things to kind of fit what he wanted, because he was a narcissist that like used people, And Bonnie saw him for what he was and kind of broke free, and so did Tesca. But you could too. But for him, it's like, no, he's too in deep. Because the difference is, because that's the thing. Bonnie had was kind of no one and was kind of indoctrinated, but she was always like not as okay being used the way she was. So she always had a little bit of one foot out the door. Tesca as well, because Tesca's whole thing was a lie. Like, it was just manipulation by Jones. But so it's just an interesting 3 different circumstances, and once again 2 out of the 3. Can Clivey say that was kind of the conversation I had last episode? I was like, no, I think he is going to end up dead by the end of the series. But I was curious what Liz was going to do, because it did seem like she was crafting some plan, but I wasn't sure how that was all going to work out. I was like, are you going to just run and pick up the pickaxe? Like, what are you going to do? It's like, no, there was a multi-stage process to the whole thing. So she ended up collapsing part of some of that rubble on top of Clyde, and ended up stripping him of his powers in the process. And the moment he's there with the boulder on his arm and rubble on his arm, and he can't remove it, it's like, right, you're most likely, I was like, his devotion, once again, that cult-like behavior, like, I'll find a way out of this, that like any sacrifice will be for the end result. It's all that matters. And so he ended up cutting off his own arm. So I think they specifically, it's not as much of his arm, it was mainly his hand. So, but I'm sure there was a little bit of forearm with it as well, but still. But it does seem like they are in a position where they can actually help Liz now. Because it's sad, because at the same time, like, Max did try to go to Shivani to get the purple mist, but Shivani didn't want to let things go. She's like, right, this is the safest place for it to be. It's like, well, with you the way you are now, it's not necessarily the best place either. And as the end result of the episode kind of shows, it definitely wasn't. That Shivani says and does what she can to, like, basically hurt Max. It's like, right, you're holding her back. Like, because of my heightened brain, I see the end result that there's no future for you or Liz or Tekka. But for Max, it's like, I'm tired of people telling me what my future is going to be. I'm going to take my future in my own hands. He just needed to miss because he was hoping that he could use it to get his powers back. But Shivani, I mean, he didn't really need to explain himself, because, like, she's not part of the loop, and especially because I think he blamed her more than anything, because it's like, right, you set Liz down on this path, you put her in this position where she's in danger, not only because of this whole Clyde thing, but also because she's kind of a danger to herself because of you. And it's like, well, to be fair, it's like, the way she's saying all that, it's like, you want to talk about her and Max, but it's like, what about you? I mean, she kind of abandoned you too, because you were kind of like too emotional. So it's interesting that the moment she's all talking about how, like, oh, Liz is finally, like, not being driven by her emotions, like, well, because she's not driven by her emotions, she abandoned you. So, but I guess it's like, the part of her brain, like, being like, I want what I want, and she understands the logic behind why Liz is doing, I don't know. But I think it was more so just being like, Max doesn't get what he wants either. Like, it's not going to work out for you. And sadly, he walked away without the mist in this episode. But he does say that he will find a way to get his powers back, because it's like, I can't like Liz almost died. She got caught up in all of this, like everything, like the dominoes fell this way because of the choice he made of not wanting his abilities, and he just once again never knew the consequences would spiral out like this. And Liz realizes, she's like, right at the time I thought I could face my fears too when you were willing to face yours, but she just felt like she could hold out just a little bit longer, or just kind of figure things out. And she's like, I'm sorry I said what I said, that you are not holding me back in any way. And maybe, I don't know if Max has ever completely shaken that even now, but he wants to focus on protecting her because they've been through too much together, that the fact is they will always find a way past everything, you know? Which is interesting, like, this whole conversation about, you know, the end game results of, like, because everyone's kind of coupled up now, right? I don't think Rosa really is with anyone right now, but she kind of doesn't need to be. But it's like everyone's coupled up. Like, obviously Kyle and Isabel are figuring their whole thing out, because it's like, right, things are kind of a bit awkward between them. It's like, yeah, she's like, you go first, and he was like, yeah, we should basically go back being friends. She's like, yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. You're like, no, you weren't. You were ready to kind of like take that step, but it's like, it's just like you're not. You just keep missing each other just by a heartbeat. You just keep missing each other. And so I love that whole thing of like, yeah, it's like, well, triple, like, they were like, yeah, are you sure? Yeah. And like, about Rosa's blank memory because they didn't realize it was Clyde. I love the whole thing of, are you sure about that? And he's like, I triple checked my work. She's like, oh no, not what I ever, like, you know, say, because I know you're really good at your job. And he was like, well, no, I didn't make it. I didn't want to make it sound like I was doubting you. And she's like, oh no, of course, like, I would never doubt you. I trust you with my life. I was like, you two are so adorable. And just Rosa having to break it up, being like, yeah, sorry to make this all about me. And it's like, oh, let's kind of go on a mindscape trip. And it's like, okay, all three of them going. And Rosa talks about how awkward it is. But Kyle was like he's like, yeah, like, Isabel made it clear. She kind of closed the door on that. But Rosa's like, the fact is that you maybe instead of you talk less, listen a little more, because like, how do you know for sure Isabel is like completely on board with just a being friends thing, you know? And now Isabel feels bad because she's like, it wasn't until he closed the door on it that she's like, basically, I want to drop kick the door off its hinges. So what do I do? And Max is like, take the chance, you know? See where things go, because he talked about, I like, love stories aren't just based on one, like, the great love stories are never based on just one. It's like, oh, this perfect one moment. It's like, no, those moments are built up over a lifetime, you know? And he believes that, you know, it's never too late for any of them. So he wants his sister to kind of take that opportunity. You know, she deserves the happiness. Like, you know, they obviously both like really care for each other. So we'll see how things kind of work out. I think those two kooky kids are going to be okay. I think hopefully everyone's going to be okay. Once again, just depending on how like everything kind of falls out by the end of the series. But either way. And then we had our stinger at the end, which I thought was interesting. Clyde going to Shivani and is like, cool, give her everything she wants so she can help this supervillain accomplish what he wants. It's like, yeah, that's super cool. But, you know, it's like, once again, it's like, she's not thinking the most logically, because like, it's like, right, she's thinking with both her enhanced brain and her heart, that it's like, it is, I guess for Liz, like, compartmentalizing like that was just kind of her way, because she saw her emotions as a weakness, and Shivani sees them as her strength. So that's why she kind of gives into them a little bit more when it comes to her own daughter, whereas Liz kind of put hers on a shelf and stuff like that. But still, it's like she's like, who's to say Clyde's actually going to do what you want? And the fact of the matter is, this is a villain you're helping, but you don't care as long as you get what you want in the end. And it's just like, yeah, sometimes that desperation puts you in a position that hopefully, she is ultimately going to end up regretting this, I'm sure. But I wonder because obviously they have, I think Liz is, Shivani might be able to Shivani might be able to reverse engineer and make a cure just like Liz did, because like the purple mist helped with that. So it might be a situation of like, right, he'll probably will get his powers back with Shivani helping with the purple mist and with his understanding of everything. He's like, oh, I can bring your daughter back, because it's like, we'll see how that plays out, like how he plans on doing that. Or will he actually help her, or probably not, because he doesn't think much about humans, doesn't care about humans, so he's probably just going to string her along long enough to get what he wants. But we'll see how that plays out, like how that turns out. Because I did forget to talk about the interesting lock that Theo made. Basically, it's a genetic lock, so because of the branding, it makes it so that anyone that's in the tight circle of Ophiuchus, Theo made it so none of them can get through. That's why he needed Liz to basically undo it, so that him, like Jones and everyone, like in Ophiuchus, could go through the portal. I was like, oh, that's an interesting, because like Liz is like, I'm not an engineer, like I'm a genetic engineer, sure, but it's like, oh, because you need a genetic engineer to like, I thought the point was like to like break the lock itself and change. I mean, maybe that could still work, change the coding, but it's more so about changing his code by removing that kind of genetic marker from the symbol on him, because it's kind of like it's not just. I think it's kind of ingrained in his DNA now, not just like, it's not just a genetic marker on him, on his literal skin. I think it's in his DNA now that would have to basically be removed. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us. I also forgot to talk about the whole Vanessa thing, luckily getting saved by Rosa, because their powers are based on like frequencies and stuff. Well, Rosa's in particular, and she was able to kind of block out the frequency of Clyde's hold over her and was able to kind of set her free. I wonder how much of this is she going to remember, though. So she remembered the voice kind of telling her something, but it might all be kind of like, oh, you were kind of in a haze. It was kind of in a bit of a dream. So maybe that's all that'll kind of be allocated to. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see how things kind of play on that front too. But just in general, where all this ends up taking us. Only 2 episodes in the series left, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.